Off to a bad start here, ladies and gentlemen. Hello there, senators, and welcome back to Star Wars Democracy. Um, we're going to have a lot of fun tonight, and we're going to be talking about the Thrawn novel. Something I've been wanting to do leading up to Ahsoka is read all I can about Thrawn. If you were here last night on the stream, you heard my Star Wars story and the fact that I haven't been able to get to a lot of the novels, especially. And so, given that Thrawn is going to be one of the prominent villains in the upcoming Ahsoka show, it makes sense to read his novel. In particular, we're going to be talking about his mysterious past with Anakin Skywalker. We're going to be talking about the first three chapters, going to be reading a few excerpts from the book. So we can kind of to dive into some speculation and what that looks like when it comes to all things Thrawn. So looking forward to having you all here. Senator Tony was in the chat. He has a little bit of work business to get to, which is perfectly fine. Really appreciate his support. And feel free to throw your comments in the chat. I'll pull them up on the screen and we can talk all things Thrawn as we go through this evening. So, like I said, going to be talking a lot about Anakin and what his past is with Thrawn, because in the second chapter, we get a name drop of Anakin Skywalker. And, I think one of the things about the Thrawn novel that I like so far, and I've only read the first three chapters, is, right off the bat, it's full of mystery in chapter 1, and then chapter 2 we learn that we're going to Coruscant. That's something a lot of fans talk about is, a lot of especially prequel fans like me, sometimes we feel like the prequels don't get a lot of love, and we've been getting spoiled lately with things like Tales of the Jedi, going to Coruscant, obviously in Andor, going to Coruscant in The Mandalorian season 3. And so it's really cool when you have all of those kinds of callbacks to Coruscant and kind of like those prequel era things. So far I've been really impressed with the first three chapters. So let's kind of just dive right into chapter 1, honestly. So like I said, I'll probably be reading a few excerpts here and there just so we can kind of talk about everything. Let's start by reading just like the little epilogue for chapter 1 that this is Thrawn himself, I suppose, thinking and meditating on his thoughts. He says in chapter 1, all beings begin their lives with hopes and aspirations. Among these aspirations is the desire that there will be a straight path to those goals. It is seldom so, perhaps never. Sometimes the turns are of one's own volition, as one's thoughts and goals change over time, but more often the turns are mandated by outside forces. It was so with me. The memory is vivid, unsullied by age, the 5 admirals rising their chairs as I'm escorted into the chamber. I should say, the 5 admirals rising from their chairs as I'm escorted into the chamber. The decision of the ascendancy has been made, and they are here to deliver it. None of them is happy with the decision. I can read that in their faces, but they are officers and servants of the Chiss, and they will carry out their orders. Protocol alone demands that. The word is as I expected. Exile. The planet has already been chosen. The aristocrat will assemble the equipment necessary to ensure that solitude does not quickly become death from predators or the elements. I am led away. Once again, my path has turned. Where it will lead, I cannot say. So, Journeyman, first in the chat here says, when is this book supposed to take place? So, Journeyman, it takes place shortly after Order 66. And by shortly after, I mean a few years after Order 66. So, that's the timeline of the novel. It's not actually explicitly said in the novel yet when the timeline actually is. But based off my own research for the book, I've been able to determine that it takes place after Order 66, but not too far into the future. And just so you know, the book basically starts off not with these thoughts by Thrawn. Basically, he's given the decision has been handed down to him by the ascendancy, by the Chiss leaders, that he's going to be exiled and placed on a remote planet. Now, if you know anything about the Chiss, we know that they reign and they are somewhere in the unknown regions. So They're in the unknown regions, and basically Thrawn is told by the Ascendancy that he's going to be exiled and put on a planet. And as we find out in the first chapter, he's given, obviously it says right here, he's given equipment necessary to ensure that solitude does not quickly become death from predators or the elements. So he's given tools and the necessary needs for his survival. When Captain Park and Eli Vanto, the cadet who becomes Thrawn's translator later on, they stumble upon this hut and are basically required by the Senate law to study what these markings are. I'll read a little bit about this because I thought this part was kind of fascinating, and it really goes to show like what the Empire had become, and how much they just could care less for like the different alien species and things like that. It says here, let's see. It says, terrific, Barris muttered. So whether it's a smuggler's base or the survival camp from a shipwreck, it still comes under UA protocols. Eli winced. And remember, Eli is the cadet for the Imperial Academy who eventually becomes Thrawn's translator unwillingly. But Eli winced. The unknown alien protocols were a relic from the glory days of the Republic, when a new species was being discovered every other week and the Senate wanted every one of them contacted and studied. The modern Imperial Navy had no business handling such chores, and even less interest in doing so, and the High Command had repeatedly said so. Rumors at the Academy was that Emperor Palpatine was working to revoke the protocols, but for the moment they were still standard orders and far too many of the senators supported them. So basically, this cadet who is in the Imperial Academy recognizes the fact that the Imperials don't care anything about this. There was the unknown aliens protocols where they were supposed to, the Republic was supposed to study anything that they came across in terms of like an alien species that they had not yet documented so that they could keep record of it. And the cadet here is saying like the Imperials care nothing about that, which I think is really interesting, given kind of what we know later on. It's like Thrawn is kind of revealing to the Imperials, like, hey, there are other things out here in this galaxy, in the unknown regions, that you need to be aware about. And so it's kind of funny how we start off the book with like, yeah, we don't care anything about alien species that we've never discovered or don't have any record of. And it's like, well, maybe you should. That's what Thrawn is saying. So Journeyman following up says, is he getting exiled from his own people? Yes, he is getting exiled from his own people. So that's what we read right at the beginning, is he's getting the decision handed down from the Ascendancy, which is the governing, like, well, I'll go back here. Let's see. The 5 admirals rising from their chairs as I'm escorted into the chamber. The decision of the Ascendancy has been made, and they are here to deliver it. So the Ascendancy is the one who is handing down this decision to Thrawn, and he learns his fate of getting exiled. Now, do you want the spoiler? Should I give you the spoiler? Because so far in chapters 1 through 3, we kind of learn of Thrawn's motivations, but I've done my own research, so I kind of like have got the spoiler version of what actually is going on here. To an extent, I'm still not entirely privy to all the details, but there is more to that rather than just saying, oh, Thrawn was exiled from his own people. Journeyman says, so what's his race called? So his race is called the Chiss. He is part of the Chiss species. The Ascendancy is like this idea of his people. I, again, don't have all the details yet because they haven't really gone into too far of detail about like the Chiss people, other than like Cadet Vanto and like the Imperials, like Captain Vosk and Colonel Mosh Barris, like they know nothing about the Chiss. And that's why Eli Vanto, the cadet who's part of the Imperial Academy, eventually becomes Thrawn's translator, because he like knows of myths. Like that's all they know about the Chiss, is like these myths of these people, like these ancient kind of like warrior type people. And all they have are like legends and myths, and Thrawn's kind of like, how do you know about my people? Like this is interesting. So yeah, that's what his race is called. So I really found the unknown aliens protocols thing to be interesting because, like I said, one of Thrawn's like kind of major things that he keeps going back to in the first 3 chapters is like there are things in this galaxy you need to be aware of. And what's really cool about that too is like we'll talk about it in chapter 2 and chapter 3 when, spoiler alert, he actually goes and talks to Emperor Palpatine. He goes and talks to Emperor Palpatine. But we see like the Imperials like not necessarily like, oh, it's no big deal. Like Palpatine even says, we'll read it in a little bit. He's like, oh, it's no big deal. I'll find out about what's out there when I find out about what's out there. And Thrawn's like, no, like there's actual threats out here. And what's so interesting is we're seeing that same thing being played out in the Ahsoka show. It's like the New Republic is not acknowledging the fact that there are unknown threats out there in the unknown regions. And that's why we are speculating Thrawn is coming back, because he's like, I gotta like protect these people. And he's like this idea of a benevolent dictator, right? He's like, I am acknowledging that there's threats out here, and the only way for me to protect this galaxy and protect my own people, the Chiss, is by establishing this order, becoming heir to the Empire. That's where all this is coming from, and you see it right here. Nobody wants to acknowledge that there are other threats and other things out there in the galaxy that they may not be privy to. It's quite fascinating. Journeyman says Chiss. No, Chiss. 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 Senator Kathleen came to the party late. Which book are you reading? We are reading the Thrawn novel, Kathleen. I don't know if you have read it before, but this is the first canon novel by Timothy Zahn. It's just called Thrawn. It's a trilogy of books, but we're reading the first book because I really want to get an idea of who Thrawn is prior to the Ahsoka show. So that is what we are doing. Glad you could be here. So, all throughout chapter 1, basically what happens is Thrawn is playing games with these Imperials who have come to the planet. So Thrawn is exiled on this planet. We catch up on the story with Cadet Vanto and the captain of the ship called Strike Fast. The ship is called Strike Fast. So the captain of that ship are basically there studying these markings of this foreign alien species, because that's what the protocol said to do. And then Thrawn starts playing games with these people. So, at one point, like a ship goes down, and then at another point, like they're getting berated and attacked. Sorry about that. But Thrawn is basically just playing games with these Imperials. And we even see at the end of that chapter. So sorry, I got a cough again. We see at the end of that chapter that the captain is like, it's just one man. Like one man is doing this. And it's kind of crazy. I might have to go grab some water real quick. Just a second. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Nothing like doing this thing live and, only the second stream. You learn your lesson. You probably should have some water with you when you do things like this. So let's pick it back up where we left off. So essentially, like I said, Thrawn is starting to play games with the Imperials. He's ambushing them, basically, essentially throwing bombs at them, blowing people up, killing people. And you know what's so interesting is he's just playing games with them. Like, he's not even doing this to to like necessarily, well, I kind of digress. He's literally just kind of like killing them to kill them at this point. So you backtrack and you're like, well, you just said that like he's this benevolent dictator, like he has the best interest of people in mind. Not quite. Like that is what he's doing, right? Like he's trying to protect his Chiss people and is trying to gain the Empire's aid in doing so. And he's coming back as heir to the Empire in the Ahsoka show to essentially establish his order and make sure that the military is being ramped up to defend against outside threats. Because as we know, the New Republic is trying to demilitarize. They're trying to get rid of the military, and Thrawn's like, no, like there are bad things out there. You need to pay attention to this. And so that's what's going on. And so, yeah, like he's in the first chapter, he's just like kind of like just killing people, playing games with them. And he eventually, we see that Cadet Vanto and the captain go up in the strike fast, and they think that they're going to catch Thrawn off guard. They're like, okay, we're going to pull back. We're going to go up into like the captain's tower, like where they can see out among like the area, and we're going to catch this guy. And sure enough, they do. They see one man, and that's when they're like, this was one guy the whole time. Like this one person was wreaking havoc amongst us all. This one guy just goes into a ship. They bring in the stormtroopers. They surround the ship. They bring Thrawn out, and that's where they really start to question him and figure out, who are you? What are you doing here? Et cetera, leading into chapter 2, where eventually I'll go to chapter 2 here. And actually, we'll start with the prologue of chapter 2. First, I saw a few comments here. Journeyman says, so for summary, I have not read this book either, but since this is the first canon novel, is this book about how Thrawn becomes involved with the Empire? Yes. So the very first chapter is Thrawn. Thrawn is exiled on a planet. He's not part of the Empire. The Empire finds him on this planet, but finds him because he just starts wreaking havoc amongst them, like throwing bombs at him, blowing them up. And then that's what I just said, he gets caught, well, as we learn in a little bit, and is eventually taken to Coruscant. But let me read the prologue here to chapter 2. And this is Thrawn speaking here. He says, a life path may change because of important decisions or events. Those were what drove my current path. But sometimes the smallest event can also drive a turn. In the case of Eli Vanto, this is the cadet I was speaking of, that force was single, overheard word. Chiss. Where had Cadet Vanto heard that name? What did it mean to him? He had already spoken one reason, but there might well be others. Indeed, the full truth might have several layers. But what were they? On a ship as large as this, there was only one practical way to find out. Thus did my path take yet another turn, and certainly did his. And like I had said originally, that he's saying that because Cadet Vanto had no reason and no desire to become Thrawn's translator, because I should preface, Thrawn doesn't know basic very well. And for those who don't know, basic is the term that's used to describe like just the general like Star Wars language, basic. So Thrawn doesn't know a lot of it, but he's able to speak for the most part pretty well when it comes to that. And so he needs a translator to be able to talk on certain things. And so that's where Cadet Vanto comes in. And so he takes this cadet, and this cadet becomes his translator. Let's see here, page 26. I wanted to point out that this is where he's taken to Coruscant. So I'll read this little excerpt for you. So Eli, the cadet, says, no, sir, Eli managed. The surprises were coming way too fast. Actually, yes, sir, I do. Why does he need to know basic? Aren't we putting him back on his planet? There was a quiet stir among the officers, and Eli had the sudden sense that he'd just crossed an invisible line. He tensed. So the cadet was basically not supposed to be talking when he was talking. No, Park said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if this was a question he and the others had already hashed over and hadn't necessarily agreed on. We're taking him to Coruscant. 2, Eli clamped his mouth shut. Visions of ancient kings paraded defeated enemies through the streets, flashing through his mind. But surely that wasn't what Park had in mind, was it? I believe the Emperor will be interested in meeting him and learning about these chiss, Park said. There was something in his tone that suggested the explanation was as much for his officers' benefit as for Eli's. I also believe that they could prove an important asset to the Empire. Do your myths include any suggestion of where their home planet might be located? So, as you can see here, like they don't know a lot about the Chiss, only myths and legends, really. And they come to the conclusion that like the Emperor is going to want to know about these people, and so that's where the captain is like, we're going to take him to the Emperor. And so we pick up that conversation. I won't read the whole conversation for you. Um, but basically we get mention of the Imperial Palace. So for those who don't know, the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the main one, gets turned into the Imperial Palace where the Emperor basically lives. We get mention of that. As they're flying through the city, we get mention of the Galactic Senate. So again, just a sequel or a prequel trilogies fans, like best case scenario, getting mention of all these cool things in the novel, which is partly why I love the novel so much. Love to get some of the prequel era content. Let's see. So this is where Thrawn is before His Majesty, the Emperor himself, and it was just so cool. Like you don't get the Emperor very often anymore, so to see the Emperor go up in the novel this early in Chapter 2 was just really cool. This is Thrawn. If I may, Your Majesty, Thrawn put in before Park could answer. I am not merely a gift. I am also a resource. Once you have never seen the like of before, and may never see again. You would do well to utilize me. So Thrawn is making his appeal before the Emperor here of like, listen, you need me for something. The Emperor says, would I? The Emperor said, sounding amused. Certainly you're a resource of unlimited confidence. What exactly do you offer, Chiss? As a start, I offer information, Thrawn said. If he was offended, Eli couldn't hear it in his voice. There are threats lurking in the unknown regions, threats that will someday find your empire. I am familiar with many of them. So again, Thrawn making that appeal here of like, listen, there are things out there that you need to know about. There are things out there that you need to know about. He's like, I'm familiar with them too. Like, use me, please. And this is where the Emperor kind of downplays it, right? He goes, I will learn of them soon enough on my own, the Emperor countered placidly. Can you offer me anything more? Perhaps you will learn of them in time to defeat them, Thrawn said. Perhaps you will not. What more do I offer? I offer my military skill. You could utilize that skill in making plans to seek out and eliminate these dangers. These threats you speak of, the Emperor said, I presume they're not simply threats to my empire? No, Your Majesty, Thrawn said. They are also threats to my people. So right there. Can you, for those who haven't read the novel, I see Sulfur Squirrel. Thank you, Senator Squirrel, for showing up. Appreciate it. For those who haven't read the novel, you can kind of start to connect the pieces here. Like, what's really cool, and I think we didn't really get to see this in Star Wars Rebels, is you have the Emperor, who we know plays the long game. You know, we know who manipulates things to his advantage, but he's got a you know an adversary, someone here who can kind of play on his level. Thrawn, he's playing the long game here. Thrawn is playing the long game here, and he's playing the long game here, especially at the end here. Let's see. He says here, what guarantee do you offer? My word is my guarantee, Thrawn said. Perhaps your servant can speak to the strength of that now. So this is Thrawn speaking. Who is the Emperor's servant? And the Emperor says, my servant, the Emperor asked, his eyes flickering to Park. I do not refer to Captain Park, Thrawn said. I speak of another. Perhaps I assumed incorrectly that he was your servant. Yet he always spoke highly of Chancellor Palpatine. So the Emperor leaned forward a little, his yellowish eyes glittering. And his name? Skywalker, Thrawn said. Anakin Skywalker. And that's the end of chapter 2. So we see right there that Thrawn name drops Anakin Skywalker to the Emperor and said, "This is your servant." But I think that's really interesting because it would appear, based off of what we're hearing, that Thrawn has had interactions with Anakin Skywalker, probably in the Clone Wars, as we'll find out later. But he goes, "This is your servant." So that, I think, says a lot about how Anakin perceived like Palpatine, or at least how Thrawn perceived Anakin to Palpatine. He's like, "I speak of your servant." And the Emperor turns to the Captain Park, who oversees the Strike Fast, the ship that brought him to Coruscant, and he's like, "No, that's not the servant I'm talking about. I'm talking about Anakin Skywalker." Now that's a name if I've ever seen one. So Journeyman says, "Do we think the Emperor had Thrawn and information about Chiss deleted from the record?" No, I don't think so. I just don't think there's a lot known about him. But as we see, the Emperor remembers Thrawn in chapter 3 based off of what Anakin had told him. And the Emperor tells Thrawn that Anakin didn't survive the Clone Wars, that he died. He doesn't tell him that Anakin is Darth Vader, which lines up with all the things we heard in Kenobi of like, no one's supposed to know that Anakin is Darth Vader. Like the Emperor literally tells Thrawn, like, no, Anakin died. Well, he didn't really die, but you know, it is what it is. He says it right here in chapter 3. He says, Jedi Skywalker survived the war then? And the Emperor says, sadly, he did not. And then Thrawn says, I mourn his passing. He was a most cunning and, may I consult my translator? The Emperor says, you may. His eyes narrowing slightly. The yellow tinge now appears stronger. Courageous is the word that he was trying to use there. He was a courageous warrior. Let's read the prologue to chapter 3 here. And this will really give you an idea of the character of Thrawn. Chapter 3. War is primarily a game of skill. It is a contest of mind, matched against mind, tactics matched against tactics. But there's also an element of chance that is more suited to games of cards or dice. A wise tactician studies those games as well and learns from them. The first lesson of card games is that the cards cannot be played in random order. Only when laid down properly can victory be achieved. In this case, there were but three cards. The first was played as the encampment. So the encampment is where Thrawn was discovered. The result was entrance to the Strike Fast. So right there, we realize, okay, he wasn't actually captured. He planned his own capturing. He planned it all. He planned to be captured. The second was a play to board the ship. The result was the promise of passage to Coruscant and the assignment of Cadet Vanto as my translator. So he wanted Cadet Vanto to be his translator. He wanted passage to Coruscant to be in front of the Emperor to make his appeal to the Empire, saying like, hey, there are threats out there. And then the third was a name, Anakin Skywalker. So he name drops this name, and the summary of why he name drops this name is because Anakin had told the Emperor about Thrawn. Perhaps even when the Emperor was Chancellor Palpatine in the Clone Wars, Anakin told Chancellor Palpatine about his interactions with Thrawn and who this Thrawn guy was and the fact that he was this awesome military tactician. And so he name drops him knowing that that will carry some weight with the Emperor. And eventually what we see is the fact that the Emperor takes his appeal and basically tells Thrawn and Cadet Vanto to go to the Imperial Academy on Coruscant and start learning, start becoming a member of the Imperial Academy. And that's kind of where the story leaves off. And I'll go to page 40 real quick because it talks about the motivations of the Emperor. He says, good, the Emperor said. His tone is deeper. The corner of his lips lift. His mouth opens slightly, revealing his teeth. Good. Anakin spoke of your insight. I'm pleased to learn he was correct. The unknown regions intrigue me, Mithral Naruto, which is actually Thrawn's name. Thrawn's name is not actually Thrawn. It's just something that he goes by. His real name is Mithral Naruto. I don't know how to say it. There is great potential there. And then Thrawn says, there is also great danger. There is great danger here as well, the Emperor countered. The corners of his lips turned downward and his eyes narrow. So, like, the Emperor doesn't like the idea of his empire not being the most dangerous thing out there. He's like, he doesn't like the fact that Thrawn keeps alluding to there's a bigger threat out there than the Emperor may realize. Thrawn says, certainly there is power here, but there is only danger to your enemies. You do not consider your people to be among those enemies? You spoke of an interest in the unknown regions. How may I assist in satisfying your curiosity? This is Thrawn to the Emperor. You seek to avoid my question, the Emperor said, his lips compressed together. Tell me, do your people regard the Empire as their enemy? I am not accountable for the future actions or goals of my people, Thrawn said. I can speak only for myself, and I have said already I will serve you, until you find it convenient to escape from my reach. I'm a warrior, Your Majesty, Thrawn said. A warrior may retreat. He does not flee. He may lie in ambush. He does not hide. He may experience victory or defeat. He does not cease to serve. I will hold you to that, the Emperor said. Why do you wish to have your translator? He knows something of my people, Thrawn said. I wish to explore the depth of that knowledge. If he has knowledge of the unknown regions, then perhaps I should instead keep him here with me. His knowledge is little more than stories and tales, Thrawn said. He will not know worlds or peoples, nor will he know hyperspace lanes and potential safe havens. That knowledge lies solely with you, the Emperor asked, his tone lowered in pitch. For the moment, Thrawn said. Later it will lie also with you. So Thrawn is promising him things too. Thrawn is like, listen, if you recruit me, then I will help you, essentially. And so that's where this relationship gets started. And that's kind of like the last kind of final point of chapter 3 that I wanted to point out. Journeyman here says, didn't Thrawn eventually figure out that he was Vader in Rebels? I don't think that he finds it out in Rebels. I don't think he ever finds out that Anakin is Vader. But I believe in one of the future books, and I could be wrong about this, it may even be this book, but I think it's a future book. He does go on a mission with Vader. So it's kind of like the imagery there is interesting. Is like he went on a mission with Anakin when in the Clone Wars. Now he's going on missions with Vader during the rebellion. So that is basically chapters 1 through 3. I kind of wanted to speculate on what we thought, like what was Anakin and Thrawn's past. Do we know anything about it? Does anybody in the chat know if we know anything about Anakin and Thrawn's past? I just find it really interesting that, like, Anakin is a big part of Thrawn's story, because what we know so far, just as a quick recap for those who may have not been here for the beginning, is the ascendancy, the Chiss ascendancy, exile Thrawn on this planet. The Imperials find him. They get ambushed by him. And then basically he is captured, but we learn later that he planned the capturing. He wanted to be captured. That was his first card that he played. The second card that he played is he wanted to be taken to Coruscant. And he wanted Eli Vanto, the cadet from the Imperial Academy, to be his translator because he knew that he needed somebody. And this person in particular had knowledge of the Chiss, or at least myths of the Chiss, knew of myths of the Chiss. So that was his second card. And then the third card that he played to gain the Emperor's favor was Anakin Skywalker. And the Emperor's like, yeah, Anakin spoke of you before. Anakin had good things to say about you. So he gains the Emperor's trust by name dropping Anakin Skywalker. I just thought that was really cool. Sulfur Squirrel says, I saw a YouTube short on it, follows up and says, all I remember is that Anakin could not read or manipulate Thrawn's mind. Interesting. So the chosen one was not able to get a read on Thrawn's mind. He found Thrawn to be perhaps intriguing, perhaps confusing, which obviously is part of Thrawn's character, right? And I think what's so interesting about Thrawn, and what I hope to learn, why I hope to learn more about him, is because, you know, Thrawn is supposed to be the heir to the Empire, right? There's the original trilogy of books, Heir to the Empire. That's what he's called. We hear Ahsoka reference him as heir to the Empire in the Ahsoka trailers. He is supposed to be the next big thing to Palpatine. assuming that Palpatine dies after episode 6, like Thrawn is the next big thing. In fact, a lot of fans are calling him the Thanos of this Mandoverse, so to speak, of all these intertwined shows and potentially movies leading up to the big event, the big movie, Dave Filoni's movie, Mandalorian movie, where Ahsoka could be involved, Boba Fett could be involved. Like Thrawn is going to be the main enemy. He will be the Thanos of this. So why? He's not a Sith. He doesn't use a lightsaber. He doesn't have the Force. How does he compare to Palpatine? And I think we're going to learn that he's just as sophisticated as Palpatine is, just in a different way. I mean, like I said, Palpatine is known for his manipulation and his efforts to manipulate and have things go his way. Thrawn's throwing it right back into his face here. He's like, I had this planned out from the beginning. It's like you're reading it and you're thinking, oh, this is good for him. But all of those prologues, all of those thoughts at the beginning of each chapter, at least the first 3, which I've read so far, reveal more about Thrawn's mind. And it's like, no, he has this plan. He has something in mind that he's trying to achieve here. And everything is going according to his plan and how he foresaw it. And who does that sound like? It sounds just like the Emperor. Journeyman says, Thrawn and Palpatine both trying to deceive and outwit each other for their first meeting, LOL. They really are on the same level. Yeah, just like we just talked about. You're spot on. Senator Kathleen says, in my opinion, I think Thrawn figured out Anakin is Vader long before Rebels. Interesting. So did you say you have read the books before? I don't know. I haven't read the book, so maybe he does find out that Anakin is Vader, and I don't know. But I think it would be really interesting, perhaps even to read it in the book. I don't know if it happens, but it would be really cool to like hear Thrawn's opinions on Vader and be like, this person reminds me of somebody. So yeah, first 3 chapters are done. So far, I have been really, I've been a fan of the book so far. I was going to try to read the first 7 chapters and talk about the first 7 chapters here, but I was like, you know what? It's probably better if we just read a little bit at a time and discuss a little bit at a time because it's a lot to cover. Honestly, probably next week when we do, I guess, suppose 4, 5, and 6, chapters 4, 5, and 6, I'll go more into detail and try to take better notes. That way we can kind of deeper into the material here so that we're not just kind of just grazing over it. Just kind of wanted to get a feel for how things were going to go this first time. But I think it'll be really fun moving forward to speculate. And like I said, if you all have the book or want to get the book or rent the book from the library, check it out. Follow along with me. We'll be doing it obviously for the next couple of weeks, hopefully. So it'll be a lot of fun to read it all at the same time. Let's see. Follows up and says, no, I just purchased them late. No, I just purchased them lately, waiting for them to come so I can read before Ahsoka. Gotcha. Yeah, I think you mentioned that last night in the stream, Kathleen. So yeah, really cool. Read them together. I think it'll provide really great insight on Thrawn prior to the Ahsoka show. However, I believe it was Star Force One last night was saying that Dave is known to change the canon material. But that being said, Timothy Zahn, who I don't know if you can read this. Here we go. Timothy Zahn, the author, was said to have been a part of the Ahsoka show and kind of give Dave some insight on what he was thinking when he wrote the character of Thrawn. So maybe Thrawn will be rather similar to how we see him in the books, and how we see him in the Ahsoka show. Speaking of the Ahsoka show, I saw today on Twitter that the run times for the first 2 episodes have released. So a few days ago, or last week, maybe it was, we heard that the Ahsoka show, the first 2 episodes, which are dropping on the same day, we're going to be in about an hour and 30 minutes long. And saw today that the first episode is somewhere in the 50, like around the 55-minute range, with the credits being included in that. And then the second episode will be 38 minutes with about 42 minutes in total, including the credits. So that'll be fantastic. I don't know if you all have any predictions on what will happen in the first 2 episodes, but I'm really, really, really hoping that we get to see Ahsoka go to that Jedi temple. And I think that she's going to have some type of vision similar to the vision that she has in the Jedi temple on Lothal when Kanan and Ezra are in the temple at the same time. Really hoping we see something like that. Because that'll just make for a great first 2 episodes, right? To get to see her go to that Jedi temple. And I mean, based on the trailer, like obviously we can expect that they're probably not going to give us very much of the last few episodes of the series. So like 4, 5, or 5, 6, 7, 8, we'll probably haven't seen any like footage from those in the trailer. So we've gotten so many lightsaber battles so far. I can't wait to see what those episodes have for us. Journeyman says, I just can't wait to see Lothal in live action. I can't either. It looks spectacular. It kind of reminds me of Coruscant in a lot of ways. So it'd be really great to see that in live action. And it looks like we're going to get it a couple of times. Now, do you think that we're going to see, like, I've kind of alluded to this in some of my videos, but do you think that we're going to see the same Rebels epilogue that we see at the end of Rebels? Like, or is Dave just going to like copy and paste that into live action? Because I don't think that he is going to. I got a bad feeling that he's going to change some things because we see in the trailer that Ahsoka and Sabine kind of meet on that terrace. If it is the same terrace, it may not even be the same terrace. We see them meet a couple of different times. And so I don't know. I'm getting nervous that we might not see the end of Rebels in live action like we thought. It's probably going to be good either way. I'm just nervous that we're not going to see the same thing. So, Senator Kathleen says, like Dave is protective of Ahsoka, I have this feeling Timothy is not going to let Dave play around with Thrawn. You're probably right to some extent, but Dave is ultimately in charge. Dave's ultimately in charge of this one. So whatever Dave says will probably go here, which is kind of fun. If anyone was going to be in charge and have to make the creative decisions, I would want it to be Dave, and I think we would all probably agree with that. Journeyman says, back where Rebels' journey began, it really will be a full circle moment. Yeah, it really will. And we talked about it last night. For someone like you who may not necessarily be excited for the Ahsoka show or have their doubts about the Ahsoka show, just think about it this way. It's literally Star Wars Rebels Season 5. That's all been pretty much confirmed. I won't go into spoilers here on this stream of what the ending scene supposedly is, or one of the ending scenes. I don't know if it's the last scene. I won't go into detail on the spoilers, but I really hope at the end we get to see, and this is not the spoilers, I hope we get to see the reunion of the Ghost crew. And if not at the end, I hope we get to see it at some point in the series, because that's something that was obviously lacking from the sequel trilogy. You know, we didn't get to see the reunion of Luke, Han, and Leia. So to make up for it, wouldn't it be really great just to see a satisfying reunion of the Ghost crew with Zeb, Hera, Sabine, Ahsoka, Ezra, and maybe they can find a way to incorporate Kanan through like the Loth Wolf or something like that. But I think that would be really cool. Senator Tony has returned. Good to see you, Tony. Senator Kathleen says, agree with you, Journeyman. And then Senator Squirrel says he might, but no matter what, in Dave I trust. That is 1000% true. In Dave we trust. Journeyman says, bring the band back together. Justice for the sequels. Yeah, you know, just so unfortunate the things that we didn't get to see in the sequels, but nonetheless, it's been really great to get this content from Dave recently and John, despite what you think about like the Book of Boba Fett. Most of the content we've been getting from the two of them lately has been fantastic, and the cool thing is Ahsoka is all Dave Filoni. It's all Dave Filoni, so that will be really good. Senator Tony says, thank you. I think that's going to be pretty much it for this one, guys. I really appreciate you all turning out. All the senators of the channel together. It's been a fantastic time with all of you. There has been no motion to adjourn, but I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting until next week, when we'll pick back up next Thursday with chapters 4, 5, and 6. And then on Wednesday, we'll also do a stream just covering the Star Wars news of the week in anticipation for Ahsoka. Because guess what? It's happening in less than 2 weeks at this point. Ahsoka episodes 1 and 2 will be here before we know it. We'll have one more stream next week covering the Star Wars news. And then the Wednesday after that will basically be full on Ahsoka. And we're going to be breaking down the first 2 episodes. It's kind of hard to believe that it's already here. And like I said, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to bring on guests and talk about all things Ahsoka, all things Star Wars, and all that good stuff. Be on the lookout as well for a video coming out in the near future about Ezra Bridger and whether or not I think Ezra Bridger will be turning to the dark side in the Ahsoka series or at some point in the near future when it comes to Star Wars projects. So I see here, final thoughts. Kathleen here says, yes, and Dave, we trust. And then Journeyman has seconded the motion to go ahead and end the stream here. So appreciate all of you. May the force be with all of you always.